I'd like to just casually share with you what it feels like to be awake to your true nature. I don't know where you're at in your awakening process or your self-realization unfoldment, but I'm going to share with you just from my own personal experience what it's like to be awakened to the true nature, because there are so many significant, amazing shifts that will happen, and they stay. They don't come and go, they last. And my experience is that post awakening, the opening, the deepening, if you will, into your true nature just keeps getting more and more open and more deep. I'm going to share 7 or 8 today, and then 7 or 8 other ones in my next video. And these again are just my own personal experiences of what's happening post-awakening. Again, awakening is not an event, it's an unfolding that happens. For many of us it happens gradually, but for some of us it's more spontaneous and it happens more abruptly. But there's a profound shift from the perception of separation to the lived awareness as pure oneness. It's not a concept, it's not a state of mind, it's an actual, tangible experience of life. And I may be squinting quite a bit because it's, as you can see, it's really bright out here today. It's a beautiful day, the end of January. And I want to start with the embodiment of wisdom. Before we wake up, we tend to pull information from the ego mind, from the intellect. We perceive that our wisdom has to do with our intellectual intelligence, our IQ, or our EQ. But post-awakening, what we find is that there is this innate wisdom. It's not personal. It's in every single thing in this universe. It's what makes the blades of grass grow without any help from anyone, what changes the seasons. Everything that has life in it has this wisdom in it. It's always been in you, but before you wake up, when you're still identified with the body mind, with the ego structure, with the conditioned self, that wisdom seems to be blocked. And after you wake up, it's like it opens up, it's spontaneous, it comes from a deep inner knowing that guides your actions, and there's this source of clarity that illuminates your path. It helps us navigate life with grace, true grace and ease. It doesn't, there's no struggling about it. We're not, trying to, do I make this decision or that decision? There's just an ease that comes through because of this wisdom. And it's just wisdom that's in the flow of life. There's also, once you wake up, this clear awareness of your thoughts and your feelings, your bodily sensations, your perceptions. It's always like you've always been aware of, you hear the thoughts in your mind, you feel the bodily sensations, but after you wake up, there's this clear awareness. They become more prominent in a way, and yet you're very clear that you are not that. So bodily pleasure can arise, or bodily pain will arise, but there's no longer an identification with it, if that makes sense. It's really this clear awareness of the I am infinite consciousness that observes all of these changing phenomena. There's also this, and I've spoken of this before, this reverence for life. I mean, just, where I hear, but I could be anywhere. There's this reverence for all of life, whether you're at the beach or you're at a desk or you're out for a walk or you're driving the car. There's this reverence for everyone and everything around us. It really opens up your field of awareness because, again, before we wake up, we're so identified with the mind. Many of us are just caught up in the mind. We're not even aware of what's around us. It feels like this, I don't know, this VR headset is taken off. The virtual reality of what we thought life was is removed, and everything opens up. And so the judgment that we had before we awaken, the judgment that comes from the mind that says, I'm separate and you are other, and there's this and there's that, and we like it or we don't like it, and we have all these preferences, that dissolves. And in this post-awakening dissolution of the judgment leaves this reverence for everything and everyone. And it brings about a profound, pure happiness, this unshakable sense of connection with all things. There's also let's put it this way, your true nature is effortless. The ego structure, the body-mind, requires a lot of effort to maintain. I don't know how else to say it. We're constantly wanting to protect the body. We get worried when something goes wrong with the body. We're wanting to defend our beliefs. We want to defend our values. We want to defend what we stand for. Oh boy, it's exhausting. And I didn't know how exhausting it was until the dissolution again, or the waking up from that ego structure. In contrast to that exhausting maintaining of the body and the mind is this pure essence that requires no effort. It doesn't require any effort. It's because it's who you are. It's who we are. We don't have to work at what we naturally are. It exists naturally and spontaneously. So just from, again, speaking from my own life, I don't have the fatigue. I don't have the mental fatigue. Sure, my body still gets tired. By the end of the day, the end of a long day, the body definitely feels the fatigue, but the mind doesn't, because I haven't been efforting. I haven't been trying to control life, as it were. So there's definitely more freed up space in the body, and there's more energy in general. There's also your experience of the direct experience. I just did a video on this, so if you don't know much about the direct experience, I get into it more in a recent video. The direct experience is, okay, let's say before you wake up, there's this constant clutter of mental activity, and that stops. I'm not saying the mind doesn't still move. There's still mental activity. When I need the mind to use the mind to, shoot this video, the mind comes online as I need it, but now there's not all the clutter, the chatter of ongoing mental activity as much. So now life is experienced through the 5 sense gates. So it brings you into full presence. Notice how often when you're going through your day, you're so caught up in your thinking, there's no room to really be present. You're not in touch with the 5 senses. So what you're seeing is often clouded. There's like these veils in front of what we see from the mind activity. There's veils in what we hear from the mind activity, what you feel, what you taste, what you smell. All of the senses get blocked. Your beloved animal companions, if you have a pet, a dog, a cat, a bird, a rabbit, whatever you have, they're having a direct experience all of the time. They're always present. Post-awakening, those sense gates really open up. They're always opened up. I make it sound like this is something new. It's really not. It's always been like this. But again, the mind has put this overlay of thinking on top of the senses. And so we're not really feeling life vibrantly. Post-awakening with the direct experience is this vibrancy and this aliveness for life hearing the sounds of these waves, and there's a light, very faint breeze. I could smell, this is ocean, so there's the salt air coming through. It's real light. There's a few boats out this way. The sky is beautifully blue with just a little bit of cloudscape going on. I could feel the body supported by the chair, and the feet are supported by the sand. It's really alive. Here's sand. I can really feel it. Really feel it, the texture. This is a real powdery sand, 'cause I'm here on the Atlantic Ocean these days. It used to be on the Pacific Ocean, and that sand is much grainier, totally different texture. But see, these are things that pre-awakening often are blocked. You've got about 2 or 3 seconds of seeing something with fresh eyes before the mind gets in there and will color it with all the labeling, and will color it with past experience and past perceptions. So pre-awakening, there's just not the same vibrancy as there is post-awakening. And this experience, which is lasting, brings so much contentment, because what do we need to run after or to go after to fill us up when we can have the experience like I just had of that beautiful powdery sand sifting through my hands, or hearing the sound from the waves? So there's this contentment that brings about actual joy. There's also post-awakening the ending, the cessation of prolonged suffering. In fact, there isn't suffering anymore. You will still feel pain from a loss of a loved one, or feel the pain of someone else's sadness because maybe they're in pain over the loss of a loved one, or an illness, or some fear that they're working through. But the pain body that Eckhart Tolle introduced us to with the power of now many, many years ago, that, if you're familiar with his work, that pain body dissolves. It's dissolving over time as the awakening unfolds. But there comes a time where the pain body no longer exists. This is huge. For my own life, I could tell you that pain body had enormous control over my life for a long time. I absorbed the pain bodies of my parents, and they were quite large. My mother's pain body felt like the size of the whole planet. And then, being the youngest of 3, I felt the pain of my brother and sister. I ended up with a very large pain body by the time I was 14. I didn't understand it until I read The Power of Now. And then finally, Eckhart, put words to what I was struggling with. There's some birds flying around. You might see some birds coming back through. I don't know. I didn't know what, oh, here he goes. I didn't know what it was. I didn't understand where all this pain was coming from. But if you're dealing with a pain body that is quite large, it's an incentive. It's a huge motivator to wake up. Because once the awakening happens, the pain body begins to dissolve, if it hasn't already been dissolving as you've been approaching awakening. So the highs and lows aren't happening. And I know I might look kind of shadowy because there's so much sun here around me and behind me. But this equanimity that we experience now, post-awakening, really allows us to navigate life's challenges, losses, with grace and balance. We don't lose ourselves in the pain. We don't, it doesn't take us over. The fear doesn't either. And I'll say that for the next video. Also, with the cessation of suffering, there's a deep sense of contentment and well-being that happens. because you're freed up. See, again, post-awakening, really in a nutshell, is the dissolving of the conditioned self. And so now all this space and energy and time and thoughts and feelings that were going toward the conditioned self, the ego structure, gets freed up. And this lightness of being that comes through is enormous. And the last thing I want to touch on, is there's this very spontaneous dance of life. And I have talked a little bit about this. There's this dynamic interplay with life because you're no longer identifying with being the doer. Sometimes this really triggers people when I'm working with them one-on-one, and I just try to remind them that you don't have as much control over life as you'd like to think that you do. We don't. Life is happening. And post-awakening, you're in the dance with life. You're in the dance with life. And so there's a freedom from the constraints from the conditioned self that used to tell you before you wake up that you're the doer. You've got to do this and you're doing that. It's just that life is happening through us. The decisions are made spontaneously, but the mind steps in like that and takes credit for the decision. So it really looks like you are the doer. It looks like you're doing life and you're controlling life. But post-awakening, there's this spontaneous flow of freedom because you're no longer bound by the ego mind trying to think, it's trying to believe, trying to make you believe, because you're not the ego, that it's doing all the work. And that's, I think, one of the biggest lies of the ego structure. It thinks it's doing everything, and it believes that there's only a certain amount of time in which to do it. That's all made up by the ego. So post-awakening, there's a spontaneous dance of life that brings an incredible freedom to it, because you don't have to worry about getting things done. People think, well, if I wake up, nothing's going to get done. It's the opposite. Everything gets done, and it gets done effortlessly. And there's a lot of joy in it being done, because as it's being done, it's happening through you spontaneously. You're not bound by the clock. You're not bound by any sense of time now. As the impulse to do something, like me being in front of the camera doing this video, I've got my phone with my little tripod on the beach, it gets done. I don't have to worry about it. I don't even really have to think about it. I really don't even have to plan it, although I do try to do it with certain light. I've got too much light going on in this one, but that's okay. See, in the old days, this wouldn't have been okay. You hear the plane? It would have been planned very differently. It would have taken a lot of more energy. So post-awakening, I'm just giving you what it feels like. And I'm taught spontaneous, it feels effortless, it feels free. There's a tremendous amount of freedom, liberation. Mukti means liberation. That's what post-awakening is, and it's just the beginning. As I said at the very beginning of this, it keeps deepening and expanding as we remain awake. Thank you. Namaste.